Good evening, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Pink and Friday Night Preview Show. Norwich City, of course, facing Swansea City tomorrow at Carrow Road in a game I think we can officially call a top-of-the-table clash. I don't think it's too early for that. I'm Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy Davitt. Of course, we'll be taking your questions, thoughts, opinions, comments on everything Norwich City related over the next half an hour or so. So make sure you get them in and we'll try and answer as many as possible. We'll also hear from Daniel Farker over the next sort of half an hour or so, and we'll look ahead to that game against Swansea. Paddy, I think last week I was sat in a Starbucks, so this is it's quite nice to be in the comfort of my own house, although there are some sort of fireworks going off quite near me, and I do have a slight phobia of them, so it's not particularly ideal. I might be a bit jumpy during the next half an hour, but let's hope not. How are you anyway? Let's start with sort of reflecting on Millwall a little bit. I wasn't at the game, you were. Quite a frustrating night for Norwich, it seemed.
Yeah, in the final analysis, yeah. I mean, 27 shots on target, or on the goal. Unfortunately, I think it was only about 6 on target, and therein probably lies the issue why they didn't, for the weight of shots, they didn't really test Bialkowski enough. And when they did, he was up to the task. So, bit of a throwback to the kind of swing of those three home games and then Bristol City away, albeit it was only really Bristol where they found the goals to supplement a lot of the pleasing play. So unfortunately, we're going to be asking have been asking the same questions of Daniel in the last few days, and that word he keeps talking about, efficiency. And until they find it, then we're probably still going to keep coming back to this theme, especially if they're not able to pick up the results, which is the final thing they did do the other night. As he said, okay, if you don't manage to find a breakthrough, then you need to be solid and you need to keep a clean sheet. So if we accentuate the positive, they certainly did that. Tim Krul didn't really have anything to do bar that shot that clipped the top of the bar in stoppage time. And I think it was another positive step against a very well-drilled Millwall. A lot of, inevitably, when we focus on, it's about what Norwich do or don't do and what Farker does or doesn't do. But, there's some decent, well-drilled sides in this division. And I'll bracket Millwall as one of those and the Gary Rowett. They will give most teams a hard game. I think you can excuse weekend result against Huddersfield with the whole backdrop of Rowett and a lot of his coaches not being available with the coronavirus episode. So, not a bad point in the final analysis, and that's ultimately how Daniel packaged it, because it comes off the back of 5 other games where they've been unbeaten and won the majority of those. So it's still moving forward. Not the win, clearly, but we now roll into a very big game tomorrow, and Swansea will be no less easy to try and break down, and probably different to Millwall. They have that attacking edge at the top of the pitch, notably through Andre Ayew.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating encounter tomorrow, I think. In terms of the overall picture of where Norwich City are at the moment, I think a lot of people who have championship knowledge and who look at the division and analyse the division say around 10 games you get a real look at maybe how the table is forming and which sides are going to end up where, maybe with a few exceptions sometimes. As it stands, 10 games in, Norwich have won 5 and sit third in the table. And yet we're still talking about them not quite being in top gear. So sort of underscoring all of this discussion probably shows how good of a place Norwich are in at the moment, given especially how bad that end to the Premier League season was. It seems like slowly they are sort of turning the tide a little bit. Yeah.
And you talk Premier League, I kind of am now benchmarking Norwich with what are Watford doing, what are Bournemouth doing, the 2 teams who came down with them. And I know Watford got that win in midweek, but Bournemouth got beat, didn't they? Was it Sheffield Wednesday? I think 1-0, which was combined with Norwich's point, the result that moved them up a place, actually. So, I look at those 2 clubs. Obviously, Norwich went to Bournemouth and fell the wrong side of it, but they certainly deserve more from the performance down there that day. Again, talking about didn't take what the chances or the weight of possession and territory they had. But of the 3 clubs, I think Norwich are probably, after 10 games, you would say, for me, and it's not simply where they are relative to the other 2 in the table, but they just look to maybe have travelled through that turbulence of the post-relegation, the difference to the squad, and obviously then all the distraction of the transfer window, which thankfully is behind us. I think now, looking at those 3 clubs, I think Norwich are best placed to push on from here. So, positive that we can say there's probably more gears to go. And I'm just, funny enough, just reminded me, Grant Hanley, I saw his club interview after the game midweek, and he said that they think they've got more gears in them as a team, and you would certainly feel that is the case. And that, for me, should be something to be very positive about, because if their current level of productivity is 2 or 3 points off Reading, a point off second place Swansea, if they can catch and they can add the attacking edge to their play, then we could get to Christmas and things are looking in a very good place. So, for me, there's still underlying frustrations in certain aspects of their play and their performances and results. But overall, I think, as Daniel said, very happy, but can do better, and we'll expect them to do better as well.
Yeah, you've mentioned a few of the teams at the top there between you and me and everyone watching. I'm a little bit concerned about Watford and probably Reading now they've lost a couple of games. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out over the next few weeks. Let's delve into the injuries then. It kind of feels like a throwback to last season, really, with the injury list we were given. I've got them all written down. Javi Quintilla, Todd Cantwell, Lucas Rupp, Primožav Poeta, Jakob Sorensen, Ben Gibson, Marcus Stiepermann, all doubts for tomorrow. Is this just a sign of the calendar, do you think, and the relentlessness of the schedule at the moment? Or is it maybe the training volumes? I've seen people sort of ask questions about how hard that these players are being worked in training, etc. It's obviously a theme we've seen really over the last 2 years now, really. So is it just the championship schedule or is there other factors at play, do you think?
Well, I mean, it's hard for us being outside the camp. I mean, we hear about these punishing schedules they put on. I can't think for a minute at the minute Daniel Farke, his sports science and his backroom team are flogging those players on the pitches at Colney when it's Saturday, Tuesday. I think tomorrow, Daniel said, is the 7th game in 21 days, which is a very congested spell. And that's not even overlaying the last international break where, upwards of 12, 13 players are away and playing for their countries in various sort of amounts of minutes on the pitch. So, no, personally, I don't think you can tick the dial towards this is a result of what are they doing at Colney and are they working them too hard. I think it is, for me, the grueling nature of the championship fixture list that they've just come through, and obviously one more game tomorrow, and then it's a 2-week pause, albeit not for the international contingent. But when you're talking, like he said, Rupp, hamstring, Poeta, calf, these are muscular type injuries, which probably to do with the fatigue element. And for me, it is the volume of games rather than the training. I mean, they're in on Sundays, but they're more warm down and recovery sessions. And, given that they've been over this, Farke and his coaching staff have been over this course and terrain two years ago, I think they would know full well where they need to be in terms of the workload and the demands they're placing on those players in training. So, no, I think that's pretty unfair to say that that slew of names he threw out this afternoon are really down to what's happening at Colney. I think it's more to do with a very, very congested time frame. And as Daniel said, this is all off the back of not really much of a pre-season, not much of a summer because of the nature of where we've been in terms of the football season with coronavirus this year. That everything is very concertinaed, and the fact that they haven't had a proper pre-season, I think, is probably going to come home to roost. And Daniel will probably play that clip out a bit later, got into the sort of what he feels is some of the dangers in terms of the health of the players and even the quality of the product. He thinks both are going to suffer with the incessant nature of the programme and the fact that he feels in terms of areas like the substitutions or not having even breaks in games, which was the case with the Project Restart period. He thinks all of those elements are probably going to go against, as I say, the health of the players in terms of sustaining injuries and being able to play through injuries. And also, ultimately, and we might see this tomorrow, really, that, the last game at the end of a very grueling spell, you'd look at it and you think, well, two sides you want to play football who are probably as good as anything in this division. It should be set up for a really good ding-dong battle. It might be a little bit of a kind of a rather sort of, doesn't quite fail to hit the heights type game because it is ultimately the last game of a very congested spell. But it might be 4-3 now, but I think that was a factor midweek with Norwich and Millwall as well. Despite Norwich, what they didn't do in the final third and what Millwall did do defensively, I think ultimately, there are a few players there that the dial is maybe ticking towards the red zone, and that's why, you are getting a pretty gloomy fitness bulletin today. But with the caveat, I think we would expect the majority of the players he reeled off to be available. Quintilla, he's already ruled him out. Cantwell, possibly not, if he was, had an issue midweek with his ankle. But yeah, if you're asking me here and now, I would expect Rupp to play, Gibson, Sorensen, Poeta. So maybe there's a little bit of misinformation in the middle of all that as well, because you don't really want to give Swansea too many clues for what is already feels like a bit of a promotion shootout tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll read the full list. So Xavi Quintilla said 90% sort of likelihood that he wouldn't play tomorrow. That's of course for that hip flexor injury that ruled him out of the warm up against Brentford. Todd Cantwell, ankle. He didn't feature against Millwall, obviously. Lucas Rupp with the hamstring injury. I think Daniel Farker described him as a major doubt. So it will be interesting to see if he comes through. Placheta is a calf injury. He got substituted against Mill, as did Rupp. And Daniel said today that Ploetta is probably in a better place than Lucas Rupp is at the moment, with a view to tomorrow. Jakob Sorensen and Ben Gibson both have a tightness in their back, although given their left-back situation and obviously the centre-back situation, I think you're right. I think tightness of the muscle, you can probably get through those. And then Marco Stephen with that neck injury that seems to be sort of plaguing him at the moment, and a combination of illness as well that Daniel said. So that's interesting as well. We'll hear from Norwich's boss about the injury situation at the moment, but how do you think it'll impact Norwich? He kind of said that the majority of those players hadn't stepped onto the training pitch since that Millwall game, really, in terms of preparation for this promotion shootout, if that's how you want to describe it. Isn't really ideal, is it? But then I guess they've not really had a lot of time to prepare for anything this season, given both the schedule and the limited pre-season.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, I caught a bit of Swansea's presser this morning, and they've got one or two fitness issues as well. The lad they've got on loan from Chelsea, Guire, I think it is, plays in the back three. He's a bit of a doubt. I think there's one or two others, and also as well, and it is a factor, they've got to do the travel. They were not leaving Swansea until this afternoon, I believe. So I'd imagine they'll fly. I can't see them driving from that neck of the woods to Norfolk on a Friday night, but it's still. It's not ideal, whereas obviously the Norwich players don't have to deal with that element to tomorrow's game. So, yeah, I mean, defensively, that is because obviously Swansea do look particularly decent going forward. I would have been concerned anyway if there was no injuries, if I'm honest, in terms of like Norwich's back four having to deal with IU particularly, but also, they're very decent in wide areas as well with the fullbacks. And I think we'd all agree Sorensen isn't your natural left back. Why would he? He's a central midfielder by trade. He's doing a job there. He's doing a decent job there. But I think both defensively, you can see some of the balls that go in the box. His body position isn't in the right area, and also he clearly doesn't offer what a Quintilla or before him Jamal Lewis offer as an attacking left back. So they are a little bit lopsided at the minute in terms of the balance, with Max on one side who does offer that. But so, yeah, that is a concern. And that's why, I put a question to Daniel today about, injury issues aside, is it maybe Ben Gibson moving to a left-sided part of the back four and you bring in Zimmerman alongside Hanley? But Daniel was very adamant that wasn't in his thoughts, probably because there is a slight fitness issue around Ben Gibson and he feels there's an extra demand in terms of the physical aspect of playing at fullback because he wants him to obviously get forward, doesn't he? So, it sounds very clearly to me if there's no Quintilla and Gibson still staying at centre-back tomorrow, then it will be Sorensen. And we'll see. Because you can be sure, as Millwall did midweek, they will target that. Steve Cooper, very highly rated coach. They'll know that Norwich essentially have got a centre-mid playing at left back, and you can be sure they will try and probe for any vulnerability there. So, it's an issue for tomorrow, but it's certainly an issue moving forward now. I think, thankfully, we've got 2 weeks to hopefully get to the bottom of what the issue is with Javi Quintilla, because the other side, I don't think you can prolong this experiment where you've got Sorensen playing at left back, because ultimately, I think over the piece, that will catch Norwich out. Yeah,
it's a short-term fix, isn't it? James Hilton on Facebook has asked an interesting question. We'll come to this before we hear from Daniel Farker on those injuries. He said, could you see Barley Mumba playing right back and Max Aarons playing left back tomorrow? Is that something you foresee? Obviously, we saw Barley Mumba, didn't we, at Bristol City in the dying embers, and he was quite keen to impress. I think maybe a bit over-enthusiastic. Maybe that was the idea, to just give him that little run out before maybe something bigger in the weeks to come. Is he an option, do you think, for one of the fullback positions tomorrow?
Well, it's certainly an option, but it just feels, with the greatest respect, because it's Swansea, maybe not. I don't know. Pick one of the lesser lights in the division. I think he'd be more willing to probably throw the kid in. He's certainly very happy with him, and the fact he is because he now sees him as a bona fide, fully fledged first team option. There's no talk whatsoever of that man going out on loan, be it in the summer or coming up to January as well. And we all know Max Aarons' progression, that he was very happy to throw him in and trusted him to nail down a position as he did. So I wouldn't be completely taken aback if Barley Bumba was on the team sheet at 2:00 tomorrow afternoon. But I just think if he's not willing really to push Ben Gibson out there to left back, what would he then go with a completely unproven, very raw, albeit talented young fullback? So no, I think it'll be more of the same tomorrow. I think unless Gibson overnight or Sorensen for that matter really do declare themselves unavailable, I think it'll be the same back four. But that, again, a bit like with Quintilla, if we get the other side of the international window and they're still having to sort of come up with some creative solutions, and yeah, by all means, I think Barley Mumba, it wouldn't at all surprise me if he's playing a far more leading role as we progress this season, because what he has seen and the glimpses we've seen of him, he looks like he's got the maturity that Max had at that age, that it doesn't faze him and that he can be thrown in there and he would back himself to handle it. So if you've got the talent and you've got the temperament, you've got half a chance, certainly under this coach.
Yeah, absolutely, and he looked very decent in that cup game against Luton, didn't he? I thought at the very start of the season, which seems a while ago now. Let's hear from Daniel Farke. Here's what he had to say in his press conference today about the injuries that Norwich City have ahead of this game.
If I'm honest, a bit difficult today, and don't want to speak too much about the question marks because just guessing today. So we had too many problems in the last days. Too many players who were not on the training pitch in the last days. For that, we will have to assess them today, this afternoon. We have a late training session today in order to see who is really available. With many players, we'll just be able to make a final call tomorrow. In general. So, of course, we have our long-term injuries, and during the last 2 days, Todd Cantwell was still not on the training pitch together with us. We have to see if he's perhaps capable to train this afternoon. Same with Lucas Rupp and Przemysław Placheta. Both had to substitute them because they had some minor muscle problems. So question mark behind them. Perhaps behind Lucas a bit more than behind Przemysław. So, but we'll have to see. Also Ben Gibson with some problems. Jakob Lungi Sørensen with some problems. Marcus Tiepemann with some neck problems again. So again, I don't want to cry too much today. So it's more like there are a few question marks, but we're really just guessing who's really available for tomorrow or not. It's a seventh game within 21 days. It's a tricky situation. Anyhow, we have to see that who is really available and want to be there with a strong starting lineup tomorrow and want to be successful.
City boss Daniel Farke there on the injuries that Norwich have going into the game tomorrow. Probably not ideal preparation, but will be interesting to see come 2:00 tomorrow who is on that team sheet. Of course, we'll be at Carrow Road tomorrow. You can join us for a similar video to this team news live with me and Paddy. So that's certainly going to be an interesting one given the context of all these injuries. Let's get on to a few of your comments. Joe McKenzie on Facebook. Evening, boys. Fingers crossed all injuries aren't as bad as they seem. Still going for a home win. Good to have Adameda back in the squad. Neil Lufer has said, will we see Tetty and Christoph Zimmermann starting tomorrow? He's also asked about Coventry last Friday against Reading. Pad McCallum scored an excellent goal in that, it's worth noting. But do you see Tetty and Christoph Zimmermann starting tomorrow? I guess he means in the central defensive position and obviously the midfielder position, rather than sort of them two as a pairing at the back.
Yeah, so you don't know. So it doesn't mean as a centre back, because there wasn't anything untoward with Grant Hanley, was there today? Was it? So well,
that's my sort of assumption, Neil. Maybe you can correct us if that's what you do mean. But I'm guessing he means Tetty for Rupp and then Zimmermann for Gibson, presumably.
Yeah. No, I think Zimmermann for Gibson, all day long, because there's no other cab on the rank there. But no, I think he'd go McLean, if I'm honest, if Rupp isn't available, mainly because you referenced him today that, he's played every minute, I think he said, or relatively for the last 18 months. He's had to bide his time. He came in to good effect, notably at Brentford, albeit I maintain that shot was going off target. Even though it's been credited to him, but fair enough. And he's the one he's gone to in these games. I mean, he came on again the other night, didn't he? So I think if there's no Rock tomorrow, and also as well, I think in his mind, looking at the pre-season, he felt probably McLean and Skip were going to be the first choice central midfielders. They certainly started a lot of the later pre-season games out in Germany, for example. Didn't quite happen for Kenny, and he made the change. He put Rupp in, and to be fair, there's not too many fans, I'm sure, would now want to take Rupp out and bring McLean in. But if he has to do that tomorrow, I think he'd probably go that route rather than Tete. Although, again, he did reference how good Tete is to have around the camp today. But you just have to look at who he's turning to first change in terms of that central area of the pitch. And if it's not Mario, then it's been McLean for the last few games. And what I would say about, I think if Stiepermann isn't available tomorrow, I can definitely see him going with Mario in the 10 role, and he might find that's a better game for him than Brentford, to be fair, because the way Brentford moved the ball through central midfield areas that night, they were very good, and basically the game passed him by. He was the wrong side of where a lot of the action was taking place. I think if Swansea come and are a bit more patient in their possession and willing to allow Norwich a bit more space in those areas, I think that could be a far better environment for Mario maybe to start a game tomorrow if Stiepermann potentially is unavailable. But yeah, for me, no, it won't be Alex. I think it'd be Kenny McLean.
Interesting. Yeah, Rachel agrees with you. She said, evening lads, let's hope Mario Vrancic plays a full game. I'm kind of with you. I think it may be better suited to him actually tomorrow at home against Swansea. I think they'll be happy maybe to have a bit less of the ball. Colin Hildriff on Facebook said, first of our 2 European home fixtures of this season tomorrow. Of course, Swansea being from Wales. Sounds a tough ask with so many injury doubts, but if they can push through this one, at least we have an international break to regroup, or do they? We'll come on to that a little bit later. Steve Wells has said, hi guys, do you think any changes to the first 11 from obviously the draw against Millwall in midweek? Paddy, we've sort of spoken about the central midfield. Do you see any other changes anywhere across the pitch?
No, not unenforced ones. I don't see that at all. Mentally going through the side, I mean, back four would pick itself if they're all fit in terms of no Quintilla available. Skip and Rupp, again, I put that to him. How did he feel that as a pairing was working earlier today? And he was effusive. He called him fantastic midweek, and clearly now we know it did look at the time midweek a bit of a strange one to get Rupp off, because by common consent he was the best Norwich player on the pitch midweek, and you felt, well, maybe because he made the triple change and he changed the shape, but it clearly now with hindsight was because he had this hamstring issue. So you wouldn't make a change there if Rupp declares himself fit. And then, as I say, even if Steepy's fit, for me, I'd still play Mario tomorrow. I just think that might be a better suited game to him. But Buendia one side, Puerta, quite impressed with Puerta now the last couple of games. There's areas of his game that is a bit raw and he makes the wrong decision, but you always feel things could happen because he's got that pace and he's that direct type of player that he unsettles defenders. So I'm quite happy to let him have a little run in the side. And top end of the pitch, no debate for me at the minute. It's got to be the GOAT, hasn't it? So no, if we get overnight and there's no lingering issues in terms of would they be able to start, I think you'd probably go to 10 of those 11, and maybe Mario for Stiepermann would be Michael.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I'm quite. Puerta was good against Bristol City. It was good to see how he opened up the game, and I'm with you. I think in sort of tight spaces he's maybe a little bit limited technically, but of course he's so young and so raw, and the step up is so great that he does need time. I think the second half of the season, it's probably going to be interesting to see where he is, but he looks an exciting player for sure. So let's see where he is in a few months. Henry Edwards has said, will Adameda be back in the first team? Do you think? Obviously he served the final sort of match of his suspension against Millwall on Tuesday night. From what Daniel Farker said today, it seems like he'll be back in contention tomorrow.
Oh, he'll definitely be in contention, but again, how's he been utilised more often than not? I'm trying to think where the game was where he started on the left. It was Rotherham away, but after that, subsequently, it was Pookie / Hugo, and then he brought Ida on. So I think he'd look at Ida, particularly given he's missed the last 3 games. They're unbeaten in that period. Yeah, I wouldn't see either starting the game tomorrow, but great option to have if it's a very tight affair around 60-minute hour mark, and it might open up because again, a bit like Poeta, I think he offers that sort of direct thrust and energy as well. He was good the other. I'm trying to think what was the game he came up. Was it the Wickham game? In fact, where he came on and there was just an added dynamism to Norwich's work there, where it was looking like it was going to sort of peter out into a draw. But great option to have off the bench for me, not for a start, not in a minute now.
Yeah, it was interesting that Daniel said today he missed him a little bit against Millwall when he did take Poeta off. So maybe he is considered a bit more of an option for the left at the moment, particularly with Onel Hernandez out. It's certainly an interesting one. Neil Luther has clarified. He said, I would have Tetty holding and push Oliver Skipp a bit further forward. James Hilton has gone and says Josh Martin available. Yeah, fully back now from that back injury. It's a little bit just on Josh Martin very, very quickly before we hear a bit more from Daniel Farke. It's a bit of a shame it hasn't fallen for him quite yet this season because he looked quite bright in pre-season, but hopefully an opportunity will present itself for him because it feels like he's a sort of a run away from being a credible first team option for Daniel Farke.
Yeah, I mean, for him, Reed Barley Mumba for me in terms of a player who's just on the cusp of it and clearly has the ability and potential to be a regular at first team level. But is it now? Is it at this stage? And that's the imponderable, and we'll only know that if the opportunity presents itself. And as Daniel always says with young players, they get taken to the door, then they have to walk through it. But given Eder isn't really nailed down, I mean, you wouldn't say he's one of the names you'd put into the 11 week in, week out at the minute. I think he's probably a little bit further ahead than Josh Martin in terms of his first team exposure. But again, there's no doubt there's a player Daniel likes and rates very highly. We saw glimpses of his ability in pre-season, but he's obviously had this back issue. Whether that's related to, he's still a very young man, he's probably might even be elements of, body still growing and developing and just taking their time with him. I remember back now, it just popped into my head, Steven Gerrard, when he first came through at Liverpool, I think he was still having to be managed in terms of his physical capacity. And I'm not trying to, for 1 minute, say Josh Martin will turn out as good as Steven Gerrard, but they're probably better in the shorter term just to be a little bit extra careful with him because, there's no doubt, like you said, with Poeta, I could see him second half of the season really coming into his own. And again, talk about temperament with young players. You can see the way he interacts. We're lucky we're up close and personal during a lot of these. Since the Project Restart era, we get situated very close to sort of where the subs would sit because obviously they have to span out from the traditional dugouts to areas behind the dugouts. And you can just see how he's a very confident lad. He doesn't feel that he's a young player, probably out of his depth a little bit in amongst all these senior pros. It's just his body language and how he conducts himself. So if that guy gets a chance, it won't faze him at all. And again, we've seen in the last few days, the next waves of academy talent getting these professional deals. That's what it's all about in Norwich. Pertinent. We've just had the accounts published in the last few days. Ben Kensel's done some media around that and said, developing academy talent is absolutely pivotal to what this club is all about now, both from a football and a financial aspect. And there you go. Josh Martin picked him up from Arsenal, a bit of polish, and you never know. We might be talking about him in terms of the Godfreys, Jamals, Maxes in not all that distant time in the future.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hear again from Daniel Farke. We're going to have a bit of a chat about internationals and Norwich players going out on international duty in the current climate. Here's what Daniel Farke had to say on the matter this afternoon.
If I'm really honest, I'm also struggling a bit. I know, so it's difficult to find the right decisions, also with the schedule and also with the international games anyhow. But if I'm really honest, we also have to be careful that we're not heading into the wrong direction in football. So it's great that we can play further on. But anyhow, a few decisions there. When I think about the international games right now, everywhere in the country and in the world, the workload is reduced for each and every person. Anyhow, and you got the feeling right now, we try to increase the workload for the players. I don't want to complain about this, and it's a privilege that we are allowed to work, and it's great. So for that, no complaints. But it's hard to understand anyhow we have to play right now in a shorter period of time, more games in terms of league games and cup games. And right now we head into international breaks when the players don't have to play 2 games, but even 3 games anyhow. And they have to travel around in high risk areas. That's hard to accept, because anyhow we have a lockdown and no one is allowed to see his family members and sometimes not his kids. And then we send the players into high risk areas, and they travel around and not just for the competitive games, but also for friendly games. And it seems like, okay, you understand this because anyhow also the nations want probably to earn some money anyhow, but it's hard to accept if I'm honest.
Yeah, that was Daniel Farke speaking in his press conference earlier today. He's right, isn't he, Pad? Given sort of a portion of Europe are seeing a second surge of coronavirus, given that plenty of countries, as we are at the moment, are in lockdown, it's pretty preposterous, isn't it, that these footballers are being able to travel around the continent, playing international games, particularly friendlies, that don't necessarily have any meaning at all?
Absolutely. It's indisputable. What is the definition of lockdown? It's supposed to be regressing back towards, don't go out if you don't have to, don't work if you can, work from home, non-essential shops. And yet, these footballers are going to be crisscrossing all over the place. And then you can debate, there's some very big games. The Scotland boys, Northern Ireland, Michael McGovern, they got a Euro playoff final. But even that, I think, in the current climate, should they be travelling? No, is the honest answer. It makes a mockery of it, to be fair. And don't even get into friendlies is just absolutely ridiculous. What is that about? I do not understand that at all. Daniel touched on it there, whether it's a money-making exercise for some of these unions or not. But surely that should be secondary to the huge health concerns that everybody's living through at the minute. It flies in the face of where we're supposed to be going as a society in this country, and there's lockdowns in place now increasingly around other parts of mainland Europe, and to have this, the last international break, the biggest name in the world of football, Cristiano Ronaldo, tested positive for coronavirus. Go and have a look at his social media. There was pictures of him sat around a table with his Portuguese teammates, about 15 to 20 around a table. There was no social distancing going on whatsoever. How can you possibly... Daniel, we didn't hear it in that answer, but as he said, Colney is probably as safe an environment as you're going to find anywhere, because it's controlled and it's the same personnel coming in and out of that space, and everything they can do, they are doing. But when these international setups meet up, you've got players flying in from everywhere, and then they're going off to fly somewhere out to play games. We saw the fiasco with Adameda and the Republic camp in the last international break. Guaranteed, as sure as night follows day, over this international period, there will be teams/players in these international countries who contract this virus, or there'll be cases of positive tests. And, ultimately, from a purely selfish Norwich perspective, you just hope it doesn't involve any of the Norwich players. But they really are rolling the dice, and it's unfathomable. And I don't think you can really justify it by saying, well, we need to play these games. These are important qualifiers. So be it. But, there's every other area of society is having to make sacrifices. And, in football, generally, supporters are having to make the biggest sacrifices at the minute. So, but ultimately it comes down to finance, doesn't it? And there's some big tournaments around the corner, and they've already had to postpone a lot of this, clearly, from the first lockdown. And, as we saw with the Premier League restarting, ultimately the financial side of it tends to win out in these arguments. So that's where we are with it. But Daniel, everything he says there, completely agree. And if you want to go to the Pink 'Un, we've got the full video there. So it's well worth a listen, because he's talking a lot of common sense for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know logic is in short supply globally at the moment, but it is completely bonkers, isn't it, that you've got someone, or you've got players not just from Norwich City but from every club really, and domestic football is kind of packaged as being safe because these players are in bubbles, and as you said there, the protocols at Colney, and they mix with the same people. You then say in a group of however many people, they get on a plane with, again, different bubbles, and they're all mixing, and they go abroad into a different country where they're mixing with other people, and then they play a game against people from a load of different countries where the virus is at different levels. It's just,
yeah.
And then you're asking them on top of that to play an additional game. And I mean, friendlies aren't particularly attractive to football fans at the best of times, particularly behind closed doors. It just seems. I mean, where's the logic? I guess is the question, isn't it? Because for someone like Teemu Pukki, for example, who's got to fly to Finland and back again and whatnot, it's completely bonkers. I think Daniel called it right today for me in terms of just how bizarre it is. And of course, for Norwich, this has implications as well, because when they come back, they obviously have to pay for extra testing for these players once they do return to international duty. And as you say there, if there is one that does come back and is positive, then they potentially lose a key player for 2 weeks. And it kind of feels like these fixtures are being put ahead of the health, the safety, and not just from a sort of coronavirus perspective, but also from a fitness perspective as well. As we've seen with the injury bulletin today, there's a lot more muscular injuries. They're only going to increase with the volume of fixtures we see. 3 games over 2 weeks, international wise, is pretty ludicrous.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, ultimately, it'll be clubs who probably will have to deal with the consequences. And I mean, go back to the Adameda situation. When that initially broke, there was quite rightly a fear that he'd have to self-isolate and they wouldn't have had him available. I think it was Rotherham was the first game on the resumption. Turned out that wasn't the case. But can you imagine? I don't know. I mean, heaven forbid. I'll pick a name off the top of my head. Tim Krul goes away with Holland now, gets embroiled in something of that nature, has to self-isolate when he comes back. And, Norwich are without arguably their most consistent player over the last 2 seasons for 14 days or whatever. It's just, you can understand Farke's frustration. I mean, international breaks, full stop for him and his fellow coaches are about, fingers crossed, hopefully none of the players come back with any injuries. But now there's a whole different dimension to this. And as he said today, he doesn't feel that the domestic league in this country is really, all the people who are making up the rules around it are really giving those players any chance. He talked about the 3 subs instead of 5 as it was in the restart era, the breaks, touched on it before, and even the spacing out of the fixtures. He thinks all of these elements, when added together, are risking players' health and ultimately will put an inferior product on the pitch. And yeah, you have to say he is absolutely spot on. So what can we do? It is what it is. These players will disappear after tomorrow. You just hope they all come back fit, healthy and ready to go again, because I think, I haven't checked the fixtures I'd have to go back and check them, but I think there's a good few of them will be playing on the Wednesday of that second week as well. Bearing in mind they've got Middlesbrough away, I think, on the Saturday. So Daniel referenced this, the last international break, he's got Adameda and Teemu Pukki. 2 countries played each other. They're on a plane in the early hours, getting back to Norwich at sort of middle of the night on Thursday. Tim Krul was delayed coming back through Italy. I think none of this is conducive to Farke preparing his team for what will be a very difficult game at Middlesbrough. But it was ever thus, as he says, unfortunately, if you're Wickham or Rotherham, you probably don't have this issue because you don't have the volume of international players. So it's almost a backhanded compliment to the sort of quality of player Norwich have at the club. But unfortunately, this is a big downside of it, particularly in an environment, at the minute where the world is not really a safe place, is it?
No, and speaking to Teemu Pukki last week at Bristol City, he admitted that he was feeling tired. So God knows how he's going to feel after an extra 3 international fixtures that don't need to be played. I think my fear is that it's going to take someone to get very badly affected from coronavirus health-wise, or God forbid, even worse, before this is sort of thrown into the limelight. I think Daniel Farke, certainly from what I've seen, is sort of the only manager to bang the drum about concerns about this international break. So it seems preposterous, but of course Norwich City will be without a few of their players, and they'll be playing internationally. So we will of course bring you updates from the games that they're involved in. Let's finish this discussion about the international break by speaking about the players who will be in the building, because for as much as we've talked about there, the additional load that will be put on those players and the sort of high risk areas that they're going to be travelling to and from, it gives Daniel Farke time to work with Ballymumba is a good example from our discussion earlier, to work with the players he does have in the building for an additional 2 weeks. And we saw against Rotherham, he named a side with predominantly players that were sort of around in the building during that period. He gets an extra period, an extra portion to not only allow those players to recover, but equally to work with them maybe on the issues that he feels they're lacking.
Yeah. Although it's very difficult when it's such a fragmented squad that are left behind. I think it's more that, as we've discussed here at length, it's more the fitness element. I think this 2 weeks now, that's what that affords him. Quintia, I think it looks very unlikely he's going to be available tomorrow. That's 4 games he's missed now. Just get to the root of what the issue is there, and if 2 weeks rest allows him to be fit and firing and available for the Middlesbrough game, that is one upside from the international break. And ditto Cantwell. Cantwell isn't in the latest under-21 squad. He's clearly got one or two, had a hip problem, didn't he, prior to the Brentford game. Now he's got this ankle. Just rest him up and get him ready to go the other side, because once this international break's out of the way, that's it then. It's a really congested run again into the festive period, which is obviously always a very busy spell. So if they can get some additional rest and recovery into some of those players, those two principally, that's no bad thing. And then you just hope, that all that international contingent, as they did last time, to be fair, they all came back, A, no issues in terms of coronavirus, and B, healthy in terms of the games they played, and no injury pickup, because Norwich are going to need pretty much every member of that squad for this next period of games. And Zimmerman as well, who's popped into my head, he's another one. Probably he could do with 2 weeks training, a nice block of work to get himself firmly up to speed, to really exert some pressure on those two centre-backs. And, ultimately, it's just going to be a very tense period, I think, for Daniel Farke for these next 2 weeks. But for all that, it's got to get the result tomorrow and then worry about that thereafter, I think.
Absolutely. This is the time in the show we ask you to get your score predictions in as we begin to look ahead tomorrow and sort of cast our views on how that game will transpire. We'll, of course, bring you that Google video very shortly. So, yeah, make sure you get all the score predictions in. Pat, just on Swansea, before we go to that video, just to touch upon them before we perhaps speak a little bit more at length. They sit one place above Norwich in the table, 10 played, 5 wins, 4 draws, 1 defeat. Goals scored, 13, conceded 6, 19 points. It's been a really good start for Steve Cooper, who is someone that Stuart Webber knows quite well.
Yeah, I believe they're from the same neck of the woods, aren't they? Sort of North Wales area. I might be doing him a disservice there, but I'm pretty sure he's from that neck of the woods. And there's no doubt. I mean, he made his reputation with England. Did he? Was it the under-7? I get jumbled up. Was it the under-20s or the 17s?
He was coach of the under-17s when they won the World Cup.
Yeah. Which obviously then got him into Swansea, and you can kind of see what they're doing there, because prior to him, it was Graham Potter, and there's more than a crossover for me with kind of Norwich and this identity and the culture they're trying to build there, and almost the head coaches are interchangeable a little bit, and he's clearly taken on the good work that Graham Potter had established. Much like Norwich, a club who had to come out of the Premier League and sort of deal with all the negative elements to that. There's been a bit of turmoil there, isn't there, in recent years with the ownership off the pitch and what have you. That firmly looks to be behind them now. They got to the playoffs last season, fell a little bit short, and they started this season as a team who you clearly feel are going to be up there. 1 or 2 familiar faces with the likes of Ryan Bennett, Cole Norton, Corey Smith, to Norwich fans. But ultimately, yeah, I think we'll see tomorrow. I'm fully expecting this might be the toughest game so far, tougher than Brentford, who Swansea went to midweek, drew 1-1, mirrored Norwich's result, even down to Ivan Toney scored for Brentford, and then Swansea hit back. But by all accounts, Swansea were a far better side in that game. So straight away, if they've gone to Brentford and dictated at Brentford, then I would expect this to be a very, very difficult game tomorrow. And they look to be a club who are gearing up again to try and get back to the Premier League, definitely.
Yeah, and with Andre Ayew leading the line, I think they've always got a chance. 5 goals already this season. Of course, Steve Cooper and Stuart Webber work together at Wrexham and Liverpool, so 2 people who know each other very well. Let's get this Google video on tomorrow, and then we'll come back and dissect the game a little bit more. There you go. They put on some good shows, the Puppet Theatre. So,
Yeah.
Well, I recommend. We'll flick through some of the score predictions that have come in. I see a lot of 2-1 wins. It seems like Cooper has built Swansea from the back to the front, really. That he's made them quite defensively solid. Only conceded 6 goals in 10 games. They've only conceded more than 1 goal in 1 game this season, and that was their defeat to Huddersfield. So yeah. It looks like it's going to be quite a tough encounter again for Norwich, and they might be forced to play through this sort of structured defensive side, as we've seen with Millwall and Wycombe. We've kind of seen teams take 2 approaches to Norwich at home. There's the Birmingham and the Millwall approach, maybe of trying to frustrate them a little bit, or there's the Preston approach of really trying to press them. I feel we might get a bit of a hybrid from Swansea tomorrow of the 2 approaches, but a team certainly possessing a lot of quality. How do you see this one panning out, Pad? How do you think Swansea will approach it?
Yeah, well, I did look at talking about that midweek game at Brentford, and Brentford had the majority of possession that day, so that would lead you to think it probably will be, more tilted towards Norwich, trying to be proactive in this game. And then Swansea, as you say, defensively, the structure is obviously very good. Ryan Bennett's at the heart of a back 3, I think they play. And then they will probably try and, as you say, exploit any vulnerability with a player like Ayew, who's clearly as good as any striker, I think, in this division. So it just caught my eye there on that Tony video. The last 3 meetings have been 1-0, 1-0, 1-1 at Carrow Road.
You say that, apparently, according to the Swansea fan who came on Terrace Talk earlier today, which, of course, you can watch across our channels, apparently they've only won once at Carrow Road in 70 years.
7-0.
Which is quite a statistic, isn't it?
You do realise now, if that turns into twice, that you are to blame for this, putting that statistic out there, my friend.
I know that. It's fully along come Norwich territory, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, it kind of leads, the last 3 games kind of leads me to think where this might be heading, that it'll be I'll be absolutely staggered if they can fashion 27 attempts on Swansea's goal. I just don't see that at all. Because I think they are a better team than Millwall, clearly. So they're going to have to be very, very efficient, to use Daniel's phrase. And if they are, I still think it'll be a very tight affair. So, a draw 1-0 Norwich, I don't see there being too many goals in this. And it might be, we come off at the end of it and it's 2 teams who've shown each other quite a lot of respect, and maybe a little bit of sparring's gone on rather than any knockout blows are landed. I think it's still early in the season, but it does feel like these 2 will be up there and fighting it out with a fair win. So, I expect Norwich to be the aggressors, but I think they're going to find it very difficult to break this Swansea team down. So, ultimately, if they can create anywhere near the amount of chances they have done in recent games, it's absolutely imperative that they do find their shooting boots and we get a Bristol type of performance in the final third. And if they do that, then you would like to think they could get a positive result. I certainly don't see them losing the game, but whether they've quite got enough at the moment, given the backdrop of all these fitness issues, time will tell. But I certainly wouldn't see Swansea doing the parking the bus Birmingham job. I think they will try and be difficult without the ball, but looking at their results, they've also got, and Brentford being the classic example, they've obviously still got the ability to go away to decent teams in this league and create a lot of chances. I think they created twice as many chances as Brentford midweek at Brentford. So that tells you all you need to know. He clearly has, and Daniel touched on it today. It looks like a team we've got the balance right. Defensively very resolute, but they carry through IU principally that attacking threat. So real test tomorrow night.
Yeah, I know against your boys Coventry, when they drew 1-1, Coventry did press them really, really well, and Swansea really struggled in that game actually, and probably were fortunate to come out of it with a draw. But we talk about 5 unbeaten, but 3 of those are 1-1 draws. So maybe that's an omen for tomorrow. We shall see. Pad, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching. Of course, Pinkin.com will be at Carrow Road tomorrow to bring you all of the analysis and every kick as it happens to our live blog, and Daniel Farker's reaction afterwards. Make sure you keep it locked to there. Of course, 2:00 on whatever channel you're watching this now. We'll be doing the team news video as well. Given the injury bulletin we received today, that's going to be absolutely fascinating to see who makes the first team for Norwich City tomorrow. I think that just about wraps it up. Make sure you stay safe. Thank you very much for watching. It's international break, so we might not be back next week. We'll see how things transpire, but if not, we'll definitely be back ahead of Middlesbrough. Thank you very much for watching. See you soon.